Yesterday, we were talking about, well, who's the big bad guy in the American League? Because we had someone text in and say, God, I'm just so nervous that if the Mariners make the playoffs, they can't hang with the big guys. And I was thinking, but who is that right now? Like, sure, I don't ever want to see the Phillies again, frankly. I hope I forget they exist. But I can't think of a team in the American League where I can't make a case for the Mariners. It'll be tough, but where I can't make a case. What do you think?
No, I think that's totally fair. I think that kind of goes with the theme we've kind of been talking about all season, why I think the team was willing to be aggressive at the deadline and why I think that they still do stack up with any of these teams, because they are all flawed. When you catch them at their best, they look pretty good. But pretty much all of these teams, honestly, with the exception of Toronto, I mean, Toronto's had some low points, but I feel like they haven't had as many extended lulls the way that obviously the Yankees have, obviously the Red Sox have. The Tigers were really looking rough there in July. They've started to really heat back up. Yeah. And then Houston has, of course, done enough to stay on top, but we certainly haven't seen them really at their best, but that's mostly due to injuries. So I think you have to say that again, at their best, they should be able to hang with them. And to your point, listen, if the Mariners play the Phillies in the postseason, I'm not sure you're going to be complaining.
Yeah.
That's fair.
What do you see from Castillo? There's a lot of people who text in. They say they're concerned. Me personally, Jordan, I always give him the veteran benefit of the doubts. Like he'll be fine if he's called upon. What are you seeing from him, and do you feel like he is the weakest link when you look at this rotation?
Yeah, it kind of goes both ways, right? Because on one hand, you say, all right, give him the benefit of the doubt. Look what he's accomplished. On the other hand, it's like, come on, dude, you should be better than this. You should be more consistent than what you've shown. And it sometimes have been frustrating that his bad outings, man, like he's been getting rocked. That said, I do think that like once they get to the postseason, this is going to be so interesting. You know, if they get there and they're able to line up their pitching in some way. I mean, we'll see to the degree what that means, but I think for most people who maybe aren't watching the Mariners all the time, do think about what Castillo did in the postseason last time and think about what he has been capable of in some pretty big games. And that's a pretty damn good pitcher. So we know that's still in there, but I will say that he's had more moments this season that I think have been frustrating than even compared to last year, which was also kind of up and down.
Feel free to take your time with this answer since it's got a couple parts here. But we are going to start to have conversations about like, hey, do the Mariners have the pieces to make a deep playoff run if they're fortunate enough to make it, right? Look, we're not going to take any playoff appearance like you joked about for granted here in Seattle. So that being said, we can accept flaws, but you're going to start to try to think of like, well, do they have the pieces? So I was actually going to ask you the question so that hopefully we can use it as a bit of a guide as we continue this conversation over the next month. If you have to choose three things that are like, this is the essential recipe. It could be a specific stat. It could be star power. It could be like slugging and strikeouts. But if you just have to choose three things where you were like, if a team can get these three things and ace these three things, that'll give them the best shot to find postseason success. What would those three things be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you mean specifically for the Mariners or just any team.
Any
and, like,
team.
What is the any team?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. So I think that like again, we've kind of alluded to this with Seattle, but if your starters are able to go deeper, you can line it like with the off days and the way that the postseason is scheduled. Now I know they crammed it. We have a new round and whatnot. Being able to have your top relievers available as often as possible just goes such a long way. And a lot of that comes on not just how often you're using them, but how deep the starters are going in. And ultimately, if your offense can give you leads that you can afford to maybe rest some guys here or there, depending on how the stuff shakes out. Now, that said, I think that it's not just about starting pitching, of course, has a lot of weight and being able to score. But the small things, which we haven't talked about as much, but I know the base running was a big trend early on in the season, but sometimes just being able to steal a base and get into scoring position when you don't necessarily need to get another hit or another base runner, that can go a long way. And that's one thing that you look at this roster. This is where I think Julio and Randy in particular, they could come up in a huge way from a base running standpoint, because just extra 90s in the postseason just means so much. So I think that goes a long way as well. And then, of course, defensively, which I think we've seen the defensive identity of this club kind of evolve over the years, and even over this season, just with some of the acquisitions. Obviously, Ben Williamson, the rookie, really standing out. And Suarez, I think some people thought that would be a step back. For the most part, I think he's been pretty good since he got over there. We know he's been hitting as well. So we can't forget about those elements of the game. And now Robles, I know his situation is complicated right now. What he adds to maybe the outfield defense could also kind of go a long way.
I'm already looking towards the offseason. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm doing it already.
You're a Dodgers fan. It's just part of you.
How does this team get better? Because I'm looking at just the lineup today, and I say, all right, who's expendable here? Like, who's a guy that I'm just like, all right, well, if he's not here, then I'm not too worried about it. But I've become emotionally attached to all these guys. Like, how does this team get better in the offseason? And is there anything they could do? Like, does a playoff run make them more attractive? Because that's kind of been my thing. It's like, get to the playoffs, make a run. Maybe free agents want to come here. I know I just asked a lot. Just give me whatever you got out of that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, especially when they acquired 2 rentals, one of which was already very familiar in Gino. But even with Naylor, I understand fans' inclinations to just like want to extend. Like they hit a big home run, you just say extend him right now. I mean, you're even seeing this with Randy. You're seeing this with all these guys. I see people say we need to extend Cal Raleigh again. I mean, we have even here get him there long enough. So I get that. I get that you want these guys. You want to hang on to them as long as possible. But I also know that over the next month, hopefully plus, if you're a Mariners fan, that your opinion about those players is going to change over and over and over as these things happen. And so what I would say is enjoy what this team looks like right now. I'm also fascinated in this offseason, as I'm fascinated with any Mariners offseason. But I think that this offensive group that they've put together is really special. And I know last night was a disappointing end result, but I can't remember the last time I watched a Mariners team that would go down 5-0 and I'd be like, oh yeah, they could probably come back. I mean, like that is such an unfamiliar feeling. And that's what happened. I know they ended up losing, but that just says a lot about where this offensive group is. And I think you just got to appreciate it in the moment and deal with it in the offseason when it comes.
It's a really good point, Jordan. Bump was talking about some of those intangibles just earlier in the show about how encouraging it was to see them give up a grand slam in the first and then still get into it. And you said the same thing, Bump, where you were like, it's those things that feel different. So I know it's natural for fans to go, oh, the ERA isn't what it was. I get it. It's a bummer. I know that you wish you would have added another high leverage arm at the deadline. I get it. It's a bummer. But like there are these intangible things that do feel different about this club. And one of them feels like confidence. How much of that is being impacted by the fact that one of you guys has 50 home runs? Like there is a feeling, I'm sure, Jordan, of like, well, this guy can get it. You never know when he could get it done.
Well, and we've talked about Cal basically every week this season, as deservedly so. But one part about that I don't think has fully been discussed in the context of a game like that. And while I stand by the point that I just made, which is like, because you look at this offense and the confidence and the intangibles are part of it, but let's be real. We're just looking at 9 pretty good hitters. I mean, all of those guys in the lineup have had stretches where they look like really good hitters. But back to Cal, this is the other thing about the season that he's having, and especially now as he's, breaking all these records. They could be down by 25. I don't care. I'm tuning in to watch Cal Raleigh's at-bats because he is literally making history every time he hits the ball over the fence. And so you can't turn away. You have to wonder what's going to happen, even if the Mariners don't end up winning in that specific game. It's just it's incredible. And so that's what Cal Raleigh has done I mean, you could say this has been true for most of the season, but especially over the last month. You basically have to tune in because you are watching something historic, regardless of what the score is.
We've harped on kind of just the condition or the status of the AL. There's no real big dogs or someone who's dominant out there, but who's playing the best baseball over the past week or so in AL?
Yeah, I mentioned the Tigers. It seems like they've really started to kind of get their swagger back. I think the Blue Jays and now adding Shane Bieber, really excited to see the Blue Jays and Brewers face off this weekend. I think that's probably the marquee matchup. Now, I say that the Mariners are literally going to be here in Cleveland, and I will be at all 3 of those games. But putting that aside, I think among the other series, I think Brewers Blue Jays is such a fun stories of the interleague matchups of 2 teams that have been really the 2 of the most consistent all year. But I really do want to harp on Detroit because let's not forget how really dominant they looked in all phases over the first few months. Really ugly skid in the middle of the season, but it seems like they're starting to find their confidence again. And there are flaws with that roster too, but after watching them up close in the postseason last year, I do feel like that experience is going to help a lot of that roster. And that is not a team I would want to mess with in the postseason. And obviously, Tarek Skubal is a big part of that, but that's a pretty good team.
Houston is very fairly and has very fairly earned the benefit of the doubt for me, where the Mariners could be 3-up and I'd be like, oh God, I'm just so nervous. So that being said, I also recognize that they aren't the team of years past. What are you seeing from them, most especially maybe over the last month or so?
Yeah, again, their personnel has changed so often, almost on a week-to-week basis because of their injuries, that it's kind of hard to judge them. That said, I mean, not to get too narrow here, but Yordan Alvarez is just so important and so interesting. And if we're just making a list of the most intriguing, fascinating, like players I'm most curious to just see over this next month, and of course into October, he's near the top of the list. I mean, this is one of the best hitters in the world. I don't have to remind people in Seattle about that, but truly, I mean, him getting back in the lineup is a huge deal for them. But also, what does that mean? Is he what he was before? Because he wasn't exactly tearing the cover off the ball before he did go on the injured list for a lengthy stint with the hand injury. So what does he look like by the time October comes around? Because he is one of those few hitters that could just single-handedly change the entire complexion of the lineup and the way that you have to attack them. I know we're still getting used to Carlos Correa being there again, and there's some other new characters, and Pena's now back, and they have other good players for sure, but Yordan is just such a big part of what they do, and it'll be interesting to see if he can be a part of that. Again, already draw two walks last night. I know they lost to the Rockies, but just a reminder of kind of the presence that he has is it's a short list of hitters that are like that.
What do you make of the Robles situation? Obviously, he's facing a 10-game suspension. It's taking him forever to get the committee together to figure this out. How many games do you think it can get reduced to? And when do you think a decision will be made?
Again, this is one of the stranger situations I can remember following for so many of the reasons, not just the original incident, but also the repercussions on the roster and the timing with the call-ups and the decision to activate him under appeal. And what is taking so long? I really don't understand what this process is or why this is taking a while. And I have to imagine the Mariners are probably both kind of bittersweet, like frustrated that it hasn't been resolved, but also like, all right, hey, Victor's around. We get to use him. We get to play him in this game. We're going to see him get some hits and play some defense. So at some point, they're going to have to decide. I would like to think that it will get reduced to some degree, but I still expect it to be at least a week's worth of games. And they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do with that because, again, and also you want to get that over with as soon as possible so that you can get Victor as many reps going down the stretch. So it's good to see him back in there. I mean, he's just such a fun player to watch. And that alone, I think, again, now he's, a bottom of the lineup. He's not necessarily someone you're going to see at the top the way he was, earlier in his Mariners tenure. But what a fun player just to have him back. I do expect he will miss a significant amount of time here at some point soon, but I don't know when. This process is bizarre.
The Mariners are coming off just a road trip from hell. It was absolutely awful. They're getting ready for another road trip. You will be at those 3 Guardians games, and then obviously they're going to take on the Rays and the Braves before heading back home for a series opener against the Cardinals. I'm hoping for a better stretch of play against these teams compared to the road trip Seattle just had. What can you tell us about, we'll just start with the Guardians. We won't need to go through all of them, but maybe a refresher on what you've seen from Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland's kind of going through it right now. I mean, it's been an absolutely bizarre season here for so many reasons. Coming off an ALCS appearance, you have a very strange offseason where you kind of ship out some familiar pieces and you acquire a pitcher in Luis Ortiz who ends up on the restricted list alongside your on track for the Hall of Fame closer. So there's some things you can criticize Cleveland for in terms of how they've put together their roster and where their offense is at right now, other than Jose Ramirez. But also they've had some pretty rotten luck off the field as well, and that's put them in kind of a weird spot. They're a very coherent and cohesive organization to where they're never really going to bottom out, and that's why they still kind of hover around 500. But all the underlying metrics say that this just isn't that good of a team, and I think that especially offensively, this will be an interesting test for Seattle in terms of, again, the pitching, how it's traveled. This is an offense that the Mariners pitching staff should be able to handle. If that is still an issue for them, Tampa and Atlanta will be a little bit of a different story because of the personnel that they have in the ballparks that you're playing in. But Cleveland is an offense you would like to see Seattle's pitchers be able to handle them and continue their momentum offensively as well.
He is Yahoo Sports Jordan Shusterman. Thanks so much, Jordan. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Jordan.
See you guys.